Hi, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja Tutoring here. Welcome to episode 5 on our live series on data insights. Today, we're going to talk about data sufficiency. As always, doing this live, no snack breaks, no editing. If I make mistakes, you're going to see them on the YouTube forever. Now, part of why I'm saying that is that I'm kind of speaking to two different audiences here. If you are watching this live, odds are really, really good. You've studied data sufficiency before. You've seen it in quant, old GMAT, part of quant. Data sufficiency has been around for decades. If you're watching this a little bit later, you might have no idea what data sufficiency is. It's a much smaller portion of the GMAT focus than it was on the old GMAT. As we're filming this right now, it's October 2023. GMAT focus is still about 4 weeks away. Lots of things we actually don't fully know about data sufficiency. I'll get into all that stuff in a minute. So live audience, bear with me here. This is going to be a very different feel than other data sufficiency videos you might have seen me do or other test prep folks do. Going to come at it from a different direction, partly because data sufficiency has changed. So some of what I'll say in this video will be speaking to those of you that have done data sufficiency in the context of GMAT Quant on the old GMAT. For most of you, I'm going to be focused on if you've never seen data sufficiency before or only studied a little bit, you're doing it for data insights where it's just one small part of one of the 3 sections. So much reduced on the GMAT focus for the most part. I'm going to be speaking to people taking the GMAT focus. And again, a little bit different than it was on the old test. All right. So really important bit of context here. Data insights, 5 question types, as most of you probably know by now. 20 to 40% of it is going to be data sufficiency. At least that's what GMAT's telling us for now. They're also saying that that's going to change over time. So as the test evolves, as they get better data, that range is going to narrow. What is it going to narrow to? Upper end of the range, lower end of the range? We don't know yet. But what we do know for now, somewhere between 4 and 8 of the 20 questions on data insights will be data sufficiency. So 20 questions, 45 minutes. For a moment here, so for those of you that have experience with the old GMAT, I want to talk about some of the changes for GMAT Focus. So the one thing that GMAT has said publicly is data sufficiency will now include less pure math. What does that mean exactly? I spent way too much time doing every data sufficiency question, even though pretty much all of them are recycled. But going through all of the data sufficiency questions that have been released up to this point in the context of the GMAT Focus, all they've really done, there's not that many new questions out there yet. They've taken the existing questions, stripped some out. So you have fewer data sufficiency questions in the GMAT Focus version of the official guide than we did in the final old GMAT official guide. So they've removed stuff. What does that really look like? Well, here's what we know. There used to be a whole family of questions that were really heavily algebraic, maybe a fair amount of arithmetic, things where you're really just crunching through algebra, dealing with inequalities, absolute values, that sort of thing. Could be a word problem with a pretty heavy algebraic or arithmetic component. Those seem to be gone. Almost everything now is going to have a real world context. They're mostly word problems, not necessarily super wordy, but they're trying to put it all into sort of a real world data context, at least somewhat. And that's what we see pretty much universally in these questions now. In theory, pretty much any type of quant, any quant topic is fair game. So all of the things that you're studying for the quant section, all of those seem to be fair game for data sufficiency as well. But you're not seeing them in the sense where you're just going to sit there and crunch through. Remember, you've got a calculator here, so you're not going to be doing a ton of arithmetic. All right, 2 minutes and 15 seconds per question on the data insights section in general. 45 questions, 20 minutes. Now, I want you to be really careful with this. Data sufficiency, for the most part, I think on average, these questions are going to take you less than 2 minutes and 15 seconds. What I'm not saying is that you should set yourself some arbitrary limit. I'm sure people are going to try to do that, and I don't want you to. I think on average, you might, who knows where you're going to be, maybe something more like a minute and a half, something like that might be where you land. I don't think most test takers are going to actually spend this long on each data sufficiency question. That said, if you try to rush through them, if you get in the mentality, I'm going to save time by doing data sufficiency super, super fast, you're going to start making boneheaded errors. Adaptive testing can't say this enough. You make errors on questions that are easy for you. That's the apocalypse. That's when the test knocks your head off. Don't let that happen. So what today's video is all about, again, whether you've seen data sufficiency before in the context of the old GMAT or whether the only thing you've ever seen is the GMAT Focus, we want to make sure that you never beat yourself. Let the test beat you. Don't make mistakes out of sloppiness, carelessness, lack of systematicness. So I'm going to model a process for data sufficiency. It's not rocket surgery, nothing fancy. We just want to make sure you're going through the answer choices really systematically. Analyze one statement at a time. The most common, most destructive error in general on data sufficiency we've seen over decades of its existence You combine those two statements prematurely, then it's really hard to separate them out. Maybe you look at it and go, the answer is C, when in reality it's A or B or even D. And again, we'll take you through the answer choices as well here today. Make sure you're being really systematic. Make sure you don't beat yourself by combining those prematurely. Keep your statements separate. Not sexy, not exciting. You do that, you're going to be well on your way to making sure you don't make any goofy errors that are going to destroy your score. I'm going to talk about pushing the question. What I mean by that is you want to make sure you're doing everything you can with the question itself first before you launch into the statements. Very much a design feature of data sufficiency, really since its inception, is if you take a breath, take some time, try to rewrite that question in equivalent ways, do anything you can with it. It's going to pay off. Not every question is going to give you a lot to do with it, but a lot of the time there will be. Really, really key thing. Want you to have good hygiene in terms of those two things. And again, my goal here today, I am not going to be melting your face off with super hard questions. Honestly, a lot of the questions that have stayed in the official guides aren't super, super hard. Any quant content is fair game, but it doesn't get super mathy. Not a lot of algebra, not a lot of arithmetic. Light algebra is what I would say. Rate questions show up. Overlapping sets questions show up. A little bit of light number properties, nothing too crazy. One of the hard things as I was trying to design this video, thinking ahead to people who are going to be watching this years from now, only familiar with the GMAT Focus, I can't really boil the ocean and do every bit of quant content in a 1 hour session here. I'm going to assume that you have a decent command of basic algebra, basic command of work rate formula. So work equals rate times time, or distance equals rate times time. I'm going to assume you've seen a little bit of overlapping sets. If you haven't, that's okay. As we go through some of those specific topics, I'll give you references to other videos you can go watch if it's a real struggle. But again, I'm not going to get super hard or super deep into those topics, but I think some of those topics really do illustrate kind of the zeitgeist, the feel of the new data sufficiency questions. So I want to make sure we're capturing that here. All right. So yeah, great question. Thank you so much. Again, live audience, love the questions. Keep bringing them on. We're pretty much focused on GMAT Focus here. So the things I'm teaching you as far as what does it take to have really good process, good hygiene, make sure you're nailing the questions you're capable of getting right. That's universal. Same thing I've been talking about in videos since the beginning of time. Okay, well, since I've been doing videos 6, 7, 8 years. So a lot of this is going to be universal, but the focus here, the examples are going to be questions that are in the style of the new GMAT Focus. And again, they're not radically different. Think of the new GMAT Focus data sufficiency questions as a subset of the old ones for the most part. We're removing the pure math where you're just grinding through algebra or grinding through number properties. And these are going to be mostly real world context. You're going to see percentages, you're going to see ratios, you're going to see algebra, but nothing too fancy in the context of a word problem. A little bit of number properties, rates, overlapping sets, maybe occasionally probability. The word on the street, what people have been saying is they're going to be more logic heavy. They were always logic heavy. The only thing really happening here is that you're not going to get questions where all you're doing is just grinding through 8 lines of processing a quadratic equation. That's not there. So everything you're going to see here, these are questions that are fair game on the old GMAT as well. But the emphasis here is these are the kinds of questions you're going to see. I want to give you a taste of what the new GMAT, the GMAT Focus data sufficiency questions are going to feel like. All right. I think that pretty much covers us on the questions we're getting so far. Let's launch in. Go ahead and give you a minute or two on this first one. All right. If you need another minute or two on this, feel free to hit the pause button. Welcome to the style. Again, this is actually based on a really old question from, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Yes, I'm old. Stop judging. And this is the sort of thing we're seeing tons of in the new GMAT Focus materials and all the practice tests that have been released so far. Much more logic heavy. Is there math here? Yeah, we're not saying there's no math, but really it's much more about thinking, making sure you're keeping your information straight. Not super, super hard once again. And that's going to be the theme in this video. I'm not trying to melt your face off with crazy, crazy hard math. If you're looking for, crazy, crazy hard math, you're in the wrong place. That is not for this video. With that in mind, actually, we did have a question pop up from the live group. Is the math getting, there we go. I think this is worth answering. Quant and DS are easier in the Focus Edition. I wouldn't say that. I'd be very, very careful. Whenever you see somebody make a blanket statement, X is easier on the new GMAT. Be really, really careful. It's an adaptive test. You're going to have a different exam than everybody else in the room. That's how it works. So the better you do, the harder the questions are going to get. They can always get harder. Quant is essentially unchanged. Geometry's gone. Problem solving is the only question type on quant now. Certainly not easier. I wouldn't call it harder either. We've just removed geometry and stuck strictly to problem solving on the quant section. Data sufficiency has moved. Now it's part of data insights, as hopefully you all know. Is it easier than the old one? I'm not even sure I'd put it that way. I just think it's a little bit different. Again, they've removed the pure math. If you struggle more with the logic, if you struggle to pay attention, and if that's your bigger weakness, you can be phenomenal at math. But if you're not watching the language here, though not proportionately, if you're not really kind of paying attention to what that means, yeah, maybe this is actually harder for you, even though it doesn't feel hard. Welcome to the GMAT. What feels difficult and what you actually get right and wrong aren't always the same thing. Good example here. I wouldn't call this a super hard question. Seeing a nice mix of answers from the live group. Most of you are getting it. Some of you are struggling a little bit. So profit increases with the number of books sold. Sell more books, make more profit. Easy enough, but not proportionately. Our question is, are we going to make a profit of at least 80 grand on sales of 5,600 books? Very, very small thing I want to start talking about right out of the gate. One of the things I said in the intro to the video, most common mistake we see, again, historically, years and years and years of data sufficiency, decades of it, is prematurely combining statements. I don't think this is a question that's particularly going to victimize you if you do that necessarily. But there are tons of them out there, again, that the test writers aren't out to trick you or trap you or anything like that. But don't beat yourself. We see people all the time who say, oh, my mock exam scores were 700, but then I took the actual exam and it plummeted. Why? Or my practice test scores are all over the place. Why? It's because you make silly errors. I know that's a dead horse I keep beating, broken record on it. It is the biggest deal of all. If you can avoid those sloppy errors, your life is going to be so much easier. I guarantee it. Very, very small tool, popularized by Manhattan GMAT, credit where credit's due here. Doesn't do a whole lot, but if you're not familiar with the way these answer choices work on data sufficiency, I'm going to leave them on the board or leave them on the screen throughout the video here. Now, if statement one is sufficient, then the answer must be either A or D. So if this is sufficient, and again, I'm abstracting from the information here just to say how to use this to make sure it helps guide you to not making silly mistakes. If this is sufficient, then the answer has to be A or D. I can cross out a whole row. What I want you to do here, that's your cue to wash your brains and say, okay, I've made a decision about statement one. I've crossed out a whole row of stuff. I wash my brains. I reread the question, come to statement two, and then I can make a judgment about that. If this is sufficient, my answer is going to be D. If it's insufficient, my answer is going to be A. Great. What if we're in the opposite case? What if it is not sufficient? Same idea. Look at statement one alone. I don't want you reading statement two. That's where mistakes start to come in. Just deal with statement one first. Okay, let's suppose you look at this and go, this is not sufficient. That means the answer cannot be A or D. Cross out that top row. Take a breath, reread the question, wash your brains. I forget about this piece of information, just analyze this, and then off I go. If this is sufficient by itself, the answer must be B. If this is not sufficient by itself, then B is out, and then I combine them. The most common error, and I know this is not sexy, nobody wants to hear it, especially if you've done lots of data sufficiency, but if you've done lots of data sufficiency and you feel the need to watch this video, I'll bet you've made this mistake. You digest these two pieces of information together, and you kind of go, oh, it's C. It should be the very last thing you do. Don't combine until the very last thing. Statement one by itself, make a decision, cross out a whole row, take a breath, reread the question, then analyze statement two completely by itself. cross something out, and if these are both insufficient on their own, then you can analyze them together. Really, really important. I know, not sexy. You want more reps on this? I got plenty of older videos that deal with this. Also, feel free to come over to the GMAT Ninja channel. Lots of videos on just how to approach GMAT Quant, data insights, data sufficiency, where we're just going to give you reps on this and try to get you doing sloppy things. All right. With that in mind, basic technique, very basic thing, really helps you. Again, every time you cross something out, wash your brain, forget about what you just read, come back to the question, and make sure you keep those statements separate. Okay, that was the least interesting thing you're going to see on YouTube today. Let's actually do this question. Do we make at least $80,000 in sales of at least 5,600 books? Well, hey, we made at least 40,000 on 2,200 books. The temptation here is to just double it and say, well, that would be 80,000 on 4,400 books. Well, we can't make that conclusion, right? Because it's not proportional. We have no idea what happens on that 2,201st book. So we don't know how much more the profit increases from here. Statement 1 is not sufficient. I can cross out AD. What about statement 2? Well, hey, I got 86 grand. That's more than I need. Cool. On 5,300 books, great. That's less. So 300 more books. I know there's going to be more profit with those extra 300 books, the difference between the 5,600 and 5,300. So it's got to be more than 50 or 86,000, which means the profit has to be more than 80,000. My answer is B. All right. So again, I'm getting questions here about the topics that show up on the GMAT Focus. Let's see. What do we have here? We got a whole bunch of these questions coming up on the live group. The old GMAT. Supersonic Fox, but always great to see you. I appreciate you. I don't want to get into the quant section here. I want to keep this to data insights, data sufficiency. As far as what proportion you're going to see on the quant topics, on the quant section, there's no reason to think there's going to be any radical changes. We've seen no evidence of that. Spoken to a lot of folks at GMAT. They are not saying we're going to have radical changes to the quant content from the old classic GMAT to the GMAT Focus. All we know is geometry is gone. Everything else, frankly, seems to be the same topic-wise on quant. So I would assume that nothing radical is changing. Obviously, a little bit more of everything other than geometry, because you're removing, it's not a huge percentage, but you're removing whatever it is, about 8% of the questions that were geometry. So you'll see a little bit more of this stuff, but there's nothing that's going to get massively overrepresented on quant. Now, the question here from Pooja, good to see you again. Data sufficiency. Any quant topic that shows up on the quant section of the GMAT Focus is fair game for data sufficiency on data insights. Same thing we've been saying on other data insights question types, right? So two-part analysis, graphical interpretation, multi-source reasoning, even the table analysis. Yeah, you see bits and pieces of all the same quant. Could you see probability? Could you see number properties, algebra? You bet. All those things can show up on data insights. Same thing here. They're just not trying to make it pure math. They're trying to make sure it has a logical layer. Data sufficiency, you're not just going to be cranking through algebra and arithmetic. It's almost always going to be in a real world context. So the feel is very different. I don't want you running around thinking that there are topics that have been crossed off the board. There aren't any new topics. If you're transitioning from old GMAT to GMAT Focus, there's not a lot of new topics. There's really no new topics coming in terms of quant topics. There's nothing new. It's not like, hey, all of a sudden you need no calculus, nothing like that. We've removed geometry. Other than that, all of the other topics that we've always seen on the GMAT, fair game. They're packaged very differently for data insights than they are for quant, because again, they're going to put it in a real world context and not just make you crank through algebra. That is not generally what they're doing here, where they cross the board on data insights. So don't think of it as the topics are radically different. Don't even think of it as the difficulty is different. Think of it as all the quant topics are fair game, packaged differently, real world context, less pure algebra, and that's about it. Okay. Let's hit one more question here. Again, not trying to melt your face off with difficulty, just trying to get you into some good habits on data sufficiency and give you a taste for the kinds of questions you're going to see on GMAT Focus data sufficiency. Go ahead and take a minute. All right, if you need a little more time, hit that pause button. Again, goal here today, not melting your face off with hard math. That's not what you're going to see typically on data sufficiency on GMAT Focus. More about layers of logic, basic math, in this case, basic translation, basic algebra. You could look at this, I suppose, and just kind of apply logic. I think it's a lot easier to do algebraically, but be systematic. It's not hard algebra. Just make sure you're being really systematic with it. Okay, my little friend here, I'm always putting this on the board or on my whiteboard, on my paper, scratch paper, whatever you've got when you're practicing. Every single time, I want to make sure I'm keeping statements separate. I know I'm going to be a broken record on that, not sexy, but if you're making silly errors, your results are all over the place. This is one thing that can help you fix that. Some guy named Charlie eating 88 tacos for lunch. Sounds like a light snack. And he ate 3 different kinds, beef and chicken and al pastor. We want to know how many al pastor. Pretty straightforward, very nice thing they did on the question. We could say A plus B plus C equals 88. Al pastor, A, beef, B, chicken, C. That's going to be 88. How many al pastor? So kind of using the variables that I've chosen here, I just want to know what A is. All right, here's the really important thing process-wise. Here's what I want you to do every single time when the opportunity presents itself. Rewrite that question whenever they give you the opportunity. Design feature of data sufficiency since the beginning of time has not changed for GMAT Focus as I go through all the questions that are in the official guides and the practice tests. When there's an opportunity to write an equivalent question, something else that will get you A. What else is going to get you A here? Well, we've got this handy dandy little equation. If I can get B plus C, that's also going to get me A. Well, is that a big deal? No. Is it exciting? No. Why is it important to do? Again, sometimes you get to these answer choices and it's hard to see the relevance of them right away. That's what makes data sufficiency challenging sometimes is, well, this doesn't have anything to do with it. So you want to make sure you're being really systematic. Sometimes these different ways you rewrite it, sometimes you're going to rewrite the question 3 ways, 5 ways, 6 ways, not unusual at all. As you do that, a lot of the time, it gives you the opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute. Now, as I look at statement 2 that seems totally irrelevant, maybe it doesn't tell me anything about A or whatever. Maybe I see something. You're trying to, it's a tool to help you see how those answer choices are relevant. So always, 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 if you can rewrite that question in different ways that are equivalent, logically equivalent, please do it every single time. Going to save you a lot of time, a lot of trouble in the long run. Okay, that's that. I want A, I want B plus C. What do I have in statement 1? Ratio of beef to al pastor is 3:5. So, all right, beef to al pastor is 3:5. I could rewrite that and say 5B equals 3A. Now, what can I do with this? Not a whole heck of a lot. So, okay, I could get A in terms of B, punch it in. I could get B in terms of A, punch it in. But no matter what happens as I look at this equation, no matter what, I'm still going to have 2 variables. I'm not going to be able to isolate A. So I could turn that B into 3/5 A, but I still have the C hanging out. So no way for me to solve for A, no way for me to solve for B plus C for that matter here. So AD is out. What about statement 2? Number of al pastor tacos, 3/4 as many as the total number of beef and chicken. So beef plus chicken put together, 3/4 of that's going to be the number of al pastor tacos. That sounds really good right now. All right. So this whole business of why am I so adamant about rewriting stuff here? Why is that such a big deal? Great case of it. You might look at this and go, 1 equation, 3 variables, 1 equation, 3 variables, 2 equations, 3 variables. They told me in school I can't solve that. I need 3 equations if I'm going to have 3 variables. But yeah, if I see that B plus C, I'm like, maybe I got a shot here. Maybe I can do something with that B plus C. So let me rearrange a little bit and see if I can do something with, well, B plus C is going to be equal to 4/3 A. So all I'm doing is I'm getting B plus C here. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, 4/3 times A. And now I can punch it in right there. So A plus 4/3 A is 88. Data sufficiency, I don't care what the number is in the end, doesn't matter to me. But I know that I can get a number using statement 2 by itself because I'm going to end up with just A in that equation. That's it. We're done. No math needed. Remember, you got a calculator if you need it. So if you really want to get the number, you can, but you're probably wasting your time. All right. Answer here is going to be B. It is 5/6. Sorry. Doesn't make a difference here, but that's me not reading well on my own screen. 5/6, not 3/4. And again, doesn't make any difference. Doesn't matter. Going to end up in the same 6/5 here. We're going to end up at the same conclusion that one should punch that in up there. Still going to be B. So apologies for the mistake, guys. I told you, warned you. Live videos, I make mistakes. Laugh if you'd like. All right, answer choice either way is going to be B, and we don't really even have to do the math. Don't have to worry about what it's actually going to be. Okay, thank you, live crowd, for pointing out my error. Love it. Let's do one more. I'm going to do six questions here. Again, just trying to capture the zeitgeist. What do these questions feel like? A little heavier on the logic. Make sure you're being really clean with your process. That's it. This one's not super, super hard either, but give you a couple minutes on it. See if you can do it efficiently. All right, if you need a little more time, hit the pause button. I guess if you need a little more time, you also probably could have found a more efficient way to do this. Again, what's GMAT all about? Why is it time pressured? Yeah, a typical question might be multiple ways through it, might be 3 ways, 6 different ways to do it. They're rewarding you for finding the more efficient one. So before you launch in, if you see yourself about to start doing a whole lot of math here, a whole lot of conversions, maybe messing around with rates, a whole lot of paths you could take here, some of which are better than others. If you're kind of looking down the road and going, this is going to be a big fat mess, I want you to take a breath and go, is there something easier I could do? Part of why I picked on this question, again, nothing super hard here, but it gives you plenty of those opportunities, plenty of different doors you could walk through in terms of your path forward. Some of them are going to lead you to a 3 or 4 minute solution. Some of them are going to lead you to maybe a 60-second solution. So hopefully we can do that here. Again, the key is I'm going to keep my statements separate, have really good hygiene as I go through questions. And any way I can rewrite this question, I'm going to take. I want to know is Domenico's time, and that's a hat tip to a wonderful guy here at GMAT Club, GRE Prep Club. Love you, man. Did he complete the race in less than 50 minutes? So was his time less than 50 minutes? Well, we already know this distance. We're being asked a question about time. Feels like I should be able to kind of translate this into rates, right? But what was his speed? And lo and behold, that's where the answer choices are going to take us. So is his time less than 50 minutes? Same thing as asking, is his rate greater than 10 kilometers per 50 minutes? Or if you prefer 1/5 kilometer per minute. And again, I'm not going to rehash the basics of rates or unit conversions here. I'm going to assume you have that. If you have no idea what I'm doing with this distance equals rate times time thing, no idea what I'm doing with the unit conversion, I'll do in a second. Got a bunch of really good videos on the GMAT Ninja channel, plenty more on the GMAT Club channel. Go check out the basic conversions and rates videos, and those should help you out a little bit if this is totally new to you. I'm going to assume you have at least some background in it. 1/5 kilometer per minute. That's our question, right? So is his rate greater than 1/5 kilometer per minute? Now, my temptation from here is to get right into the answer choices. and go, well, okay, 4 meters per second. What if I convert that into kilometers per minute? It should be really easy to do, right? Seconds and minutes convert nicely. Kilometers and meters convert nicely. Shouldn't be too bad. But, wait a minute. These are both in the same units, meters per second. How about I convert just this one once, and then I'm going to be done? Great. So 1/5 kilometer per minute. And what do I want? I want meters per second. So again, I'm going to assume that most of you have done this before. If you haven't, go watch some of the basic videos on it again. 1,000 meters is going to give you 1 kilometer. It's going to give you the chance to cancel these units out. 1 minute is 60 seconds. Great. So my minutes are crossed out. I got meters per second. That's what I want. Numbers aren't too bad here. Plenty of ways to think about it. I get 1,000 over 300. That's going to simplify to 10 over 3. And that's going to be 3.33 meters per second. And again, what's my question? I want to know, is Domenico's rate greater than that? Can he run at a speed of faster than 3.33 meters per second? That's it. That's all I'm being asked. And now this is a walk in the park. We put in that work up front, make that investment really, really easy. From here is the average speed. So if we know the average speed is greater than 4 meters per second, does that mean it's greater than 3.33? You bet. Dude, speedy. Got to be A or D. I can cross out B, C, E. His average speed is less than 6 meters per second. That doesn't answer my question. His speed could be less than 6 meters per second, and it could still be greater than 3.33. Could be less than that. Doesn't tell me anything. So D is out, and A is my winner. Okay. These next few questions are going to get a little bit more conceptual, a little more on the logical side, I think. A little bit less mathy, I think. Try this next one. Go ahead and take a minute. All right. If you need another minute, go ahead and take it. Good to see you here. Questions are pretty easy. Hope the test can be this easy, but it's a bloodbath in the real test. It's interesting. As I was going through sitting, because my life is very, very glamorous. As I was going through every single question I could find, again, aligned to the new GMAT Focus. So every question that GMAT has released in the context of the GMAT Focus, and I was going through all of them. And yeah, a lot of them are retread questions, things I've seen before that obviously makes it feel easier to me. But what I found interesting was how little I had to write typically. That was kind of my first, okay, I'm trying to get the feel for how it's different. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing a ton of math here. how might I make mistakes? And it's, again, it's because it's errors of inattention. I am seeing some mistakes from the live group, quite a few. And I think what happens a lot on data insights in general, and maybe data sufficiency as much or more than some of the other data insights question types, is you get this feel that, oh, this is pretty easy. I don't think you look at a lot of the new flavor of data sufficiency questions, or the ones that, again, are aligned to GMAT Focus. I think it's pretty rare, not inconceivable, that you're going to look at it and go at a glance, this looks really hard. That doesn't happen a lot. It can happen, certainly, but it doesn't happen as much as I think it did with the old style of data sufficiency. But that's not what makes them difficult, right? It's are you misapplying some piece of logic? Are you being sloppy? Is there some little piece of information in the question you're not catching? Yes, I'm not focusing on the hardest of them in this video because I want to make sure you guys are nailing the easy ones, getting your process 100% right. But it can be deceptive. And I think that that's going to be one of the dominant impressions people are going to have. Oh, these data sufficiency questions feel easy. Wait a minute, I just missed 30% of them, 40% of them. Why? So again, if you're following process really, really cleanly, keeping your head on straight, thinking logically, keeping your information organized, a lot of the same things we've talked about throughout Data Insights going to help you a ton. So yeah, I think, again, these questions aren't the hardest in this video, Bao, to your point. I do think that you're going to find, I think a lot of people watching this, I think you're going to find that as you practice large numbers of these, you're going to go, well, that set didn't feel that hard. But wait a minute, I made more errors than I would have expected. If that's happening, it's a sign that you're not paying attention to the details, maybe not reading very well, very thoroughly. Read your questions twice and make sure that you're kind of processing it in a way that you're not combining statements. That's why I focus on it so heavily in this video is, yeah, I think the data sufficiency does feel easier than it used to. Feels easier, but I'm not sure that it necessarily is. So just keep that in mind as you're practicing. All right, let's get into this question. Not a whole lot of math to do here, and this is pretty common in the new style of question. And again, these existed before, but in the ones that it's a higher proportion of them where it's not a lot of math. Okay, we got passengers, 8 different vehicles. Every passenger is going to order one sandwich. We want to know, it's not that we want to know the total number of sandwiches. We just want to know if that number is even. That's it. So total sandwiches is even. Do we have an even number of sandwiches? Is the number of passengers even? Oops. And all of a sudden, I can't spell the word passengers. That's one way we could rewrite the question. Does it do a whole lot for us? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't hurt. It took me 3 seconds. If that helps keep my head on straight, great, I'll take it. And again, seeing a decent number of errors out of the live group. So thank you, as always, people watching this live. It's really helpful for me to see what you're struggling with. Okay, 8 vehicles. If there's the same number of passengers in each vehicle, that does not feel relevant. You're going to run into that sort of thing a lot. Doesn't feel like it's important, doesn't feel useful. But wait a minute, if I have 8 times whatever that number of passengers is per vehicle, call it P here. Well, this is an integer, so this has to be an even number. Question's asking me, is the number of passengers even? I get 8 vehicles. If there's the same number of passengers in every vehicle, could be 1, could be 17, and it's a clown car. Doesn't matter. It's going to be even no matter what. So got to be either A or D. I can cross out B, C, E. 2's a layup, nice and easy. Average passengers per vehicle is 3. Yeah, okay. Well, 8 vehicles times the average per vehicle, we get 24. Don't care about the number. It's data sufficiency, doesn't matter. We know that that number is even no matter what, and D is going to be our answer here. Pretty straightforward. All right, 2 more. This next one's going to draw a little bit on overlapping sets. Again, if you've never seen overlapping sets before, you might struggle a little bit here. That's okay. You can always go study up on those later. Nothing super technical here either. Go ahead and take a minute. All right, as always, hit that pause button if you need it. Pretty classic question, not hard math. Don't need to do a lot of the arithmetic anyway. But what I'm seeing at the live group, seeing some pretty interesting stuff here. Got about 20, 25, 30% that are just like, oh, I got the answer really fast. And then seeing a whole lot of people's gears grinding, I think. And that's pretty typical. Again, question looks easy. Is it easy? You be the judge. Okay, so we want to know the total number of votes for B. If you've never seen this before, some people call it a double set matrix, little tool for these overlapping sets type questions. It's just a way to organize your information. We've got candidate A, we've got candidate B. So the votes for candidate A plus the votes for candidate B got to give us our total votes. And we've got two kinds of voters, parents and non-parents. You're either one or the other. Can't sort of be a parent. You can try. I try really hard to be a sorted parent. It doesn't work. I'm just a parent. My life is very glamorous. All right. And what are we after? We want to know the total number of votes for candidate B. So this is the one we're looking for here. And again, if you're unfamiliar, go Google overlapping sets videos, have some pretty strong ones on the GMAT Club channel here. Also over on the GMAT Ninja YouTube channel, lots of stuff on it. Nice video that goes way too deep into it, probably. All right. So candidate A got 408 of the votes cast by parents. So I'm going to put that in here. 408 of the parent votes go to A. 765 of the voters were cast by non-parents for B. I want to know this. So can I get the total number of votes for B? I'd like to know the number of parent votes for B. That will get it for me as well. Again, always taking that moment to go, are there ways for me to recycle the question? Take a breath. More time you invest in the question, the easier life's going to be. I know I'm a broken record. Absolutely critical to save in time here, being efficient, and that's going to make it easier for you to battle your way through those multi-source reasoning questions. Get nasty. Two-part analysis. Get nasty. Be efficient here. Invest in the question. It'll make you quicker. All right. A receives 75% of the parent votes. What I get a lot of people saying on this kind of question is, oh, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant because it doesn't say anything about B. I want to know the votes for B. Take a breath. Easy there. Let's see if this tells us anything. Let's work with it. 75% of the parent votes. So we're on this line right here. So if A receives 75% of the parent votes, that means B gets 25% of them. So can we calculate this? You bet. You know, this is going to be a lot of ways you can think about it. This has to be a third of that. You could also say, if you really want to do the algebra, you're not confident in the logic here, you could say, well, A gets 75% of the parent votes. So 3/4 of the parent votes, call this P. If you want to do that, that is totally fine. You can solve for P. If you can get P, you can get this number. That works too. Or you can eyeball it and kind of go, well, this has to be a third of this. Either way, whatever works for you, that's totally fine. I'm not going to bother doing the math because I know right here, just from this, just from translating this statement into just a little tiny bit of algebra here, I know that that's 408. I can solve for P. I know I'm going to get a number. I'm going to get a number here. That's going to give me a number here. That's going to give me a number here. All I need to know. I'm done. I know answer choice A is sufficient. And again, if you really want to get the number, knock yourself out. You got a calculator on data sufficiency. Statement 2, I'm going to erase everything from statement 1 here. B receives 50% of the non-parent vote. So that means that A got same number of non-parent votes. So I can get this number here. I can get this number here, but I still can't get here. So not sufficient. And my answer must be A. All right. And again, it's kind of fun. I'm seeing the live group. And again, you're all trained in the old GMAT. If you're watching this live right now, don't care about the number. Don't need to get the actual number. That was always the case, but I think even more the case here. They don't care, right? They give you a calculator. So I don't care what the number is. All I care is, can I get it? So I can stop there. So answer choice here is A. And Ramakrishnan, thank you so much. I love seeing these kinds of comments. It gets us inside your head, helps make these videos better. Yeah, this is what happens. Like, this is so normal. And you know, if you're watching these videos live, you know, typically the first 10 or 15 people punching in their answers like, this is easy. I've seen this before. This is easy peasy. In reality, this is what it feels like. We see a lot of people missing this kind of question, and it feels weird because it's not, again, you're not getting beat up by the math. Don't think of this as math. It is reasoning built on a foundation of math. It's, can you process this information well? Be systematic, be thoughtful, read twice. That's it. That's the game. That's what they're testing you on. So focus on that. And again, thank you so much for the comment. All right. I'm going to do one last question here. If you're enjoying this video, even if you're not, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if there's anything you'd like to see in future videos, let us know in the comments and we will do our best to help out. I'm going to skim through real quick. Yeah, so just to come back to your question, supersonic foxbat, that is really fun to say. No, underrepresented topics are not going to feature more. I would not assume that at all. I would not think about the change from old GMAT to new GMAT Focus. Don't think of it as a change of topics, other than geometry is gone. Just assume that those proportions roughly stay the same. Data Insights is going to present it very, very differently. But quant section, same basic breakdown of topics as we've always seen, just subtract the geometry. So yeah, a tiny bit more of everything else in theory. And then over here on the Data Insights, same topics that you've always seen, but again, they're presenting it very, very differently. So yeah, you're going to see a little more mean and median, sure, because we're analyzing graphs and charts and data, right? So sure, in theory, but from sort of a technical standpoint of do you need to study certain quant topics more than you did before, I don't see it at all. After going through absolutely everything GMAT has provided us with so far, no real changes there, no geometry. That's really nice, saves you a little bit of time. But I don't want you thinking we're going to see more of anything or greatly more of anything else, because that really isn't the case. All right. Any other general questions? I think that's it. One last question, then we'll let you go. Enjoy. This is perfect. Last question of the video here, and I'm seeing a lot of crazy things happening in the live group. Thank you so much. As always, anybody watching these live, I know it can be a little vulnerable. Have your name on a chat and putting in answers, and nobody's going to judge you. I actually judge the opposite. If you're making mistakes on stuff, I appreciate it enormously, and it makes me happy. So thank you everybody for participation throughout this series. Some of you have seen every single video. It makes me really happy. Thank you, because it just helps me tailor the videos a little bit better to people who are watching it later. All right, we got 5 salaries. It was the average of the 2 largest salaries, greater than 120,000. Personally, I don't think there's a whole lot I can do with this question. I sometimes see people kind of go, well, let me visualize it by going, all right, I'm picturing 5 salaries here. I get a little nervous when this becomes a bunch of variables. I'm not sure how that helps. I see people doing that kind of thing. If it helps you picture what's happening, I'm okay with that. I don't like kind of throwing in variables before I know how many to use them. I see people doing that on this kind of question. You could. But yeah, whenever you can visualize something, if this helps you, cool, great, why not? What can I do with that right now? I don't know. I'm looking for the average of these two. That's fine. I don't know. I haven't done a whole lot. But again, if that sort of thing helps you just get your head around what you're being asked, knock yourself out. If it doesn't, don't feel obligated. All right, average for all 5 is 120,000. Well, kind of the key here is in the language. I think there's a temptation to say, well, if the average is 120,000, the biggest ones must be greater than 120,000, or at least the average of the two biggest ones must be. I'm seeing some A's and some D's in the answer. But notice what this doesn't say. It says there's 5 salaried employees. Do we know whether they make the same salary? If this said 5 different salaries, then actually A would be sufficient. If there are 5 different salaries and the average of the two biggest ones, it's got to be bigger than 120,000. But that's not what it says. It doesn't say different. It just says 5 salaries. Maybe they're all the same. If they're all the same, then the average of the big ones is not greater than 120,000 if they're all the same. So what this is telling us is the average of the two biggest ones has to be at least 120,000, but we don't know that it has to be greater. That's why A and D is out. And again, GMAT's not out to trick you. They're not out to trap you. They're trying to measure your data evaluation skills. But just watch that language. You drop that one word. We talk about it in the context of both data insights and critical reasoning all the time, reading Comp 2 in a different way. Just make sure you're reading twice. Don't hallucinate the word different. Don't skip over it if it's there. Really important. I know, not sexy, not exciting, but that's what insulates you. And make sure you get the score you deserve here. Statement 2, average of the 3 smallest salaries is going to be less than 120,000. Well, by itself, again, if you've washed your brains properly here, I'm seeing some people picking B by itself. Yeah, B by itself. What do I know? I know the average of these 3 is less than 120,000. What do I know about the biggest 2? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. 0. So B is not sufficient. But again, if you've taken this one with you here, you may well pick B. You might pick D. So that's why I emphasize so much. Cross something out. Wash your brain. A is dead to me. It's gone. Statement 2 by itself. What do I know? Nothing. Nothing about these guys. B is out. Now that we know the average for all 5 is 120,000, average for the 3 smallest is less than 120,000. Yeah, the only way to balance this out is if these are bigger than 120,000. Has to be the case. If the average here is less than 120,000, average overall is 120. Average of these two has to be bigger. Average has to be bigger. So C is my answer, and that is that. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this, or at least I hope you found it helpful. That's the more important part. If you enjoyed it, if you found it helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, leave us comments, let us know what you want to see, especially as GMAT Focus evolves. Again, we're filming this before GMAT Focus tests are even available. They kick off in about 4 weeks from right now. So let us know what you need. Let us know what you're struggling with. We'll do our best to get to the content you need. Come see us on the forums on GMAT Club. And as always, thank you everybody for watching. Well, hold on a sec. I am getting, let me address one quick general question since I've got a whole bunch of people saying, please answer this. That's not what I meant to do. Yeah. Thank you, Pooja. It depends on what you mean. And this, I think, here's the thing. GMAT invests thousands of dollars in every single official question. So when you buy that official guide, that data insights guide, the online question pack, the practice test, whatever it is, these are questions that have been retired from the test, questions that have been developed by GMAT at enormous expense. And it's because there's such a detailed process of writing, rewriting, editing, discarding, testing, all sorts of stats go into it. Psychometricians do all kinds of stuff to make sure these questions are fair and are valid and make sure that they're really testing what they're trying to test. So there's a huge process that goes into it, thousands of dollars per question. So the best source is always, always, always going to be the official stuff. There is no substitute. Make that investment. I get people all the time saying, do I really need to buy the official guides? Can I save some money? No, buy the official guides. You're going after a degree that's going to pay off, 6 figures, 7 figures, maybe even 8 figures over the course of your lifetime. Buy the books, buy the official books. That's the backbone of your studies, has to be. Where else can you get good resources? Well, it just depends. It depends on which question types we're talking about. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the Data Insights series. Reading comp critical reasoning, that hasn't changed format-wise. So you're doing verbal, old official guides, no problem. LSATs, no problem. Those are going to do good things for you. Reading comp critical reasoning, very, very similar format, maybe a little bit harder, but those are going to be good practice for you. Plenty of official questions, no shortage for verbal. Quant, again, I think skip the geometry, but you can do all the old questions from old official guides. I don't think that's a problem. Problem solving only on the quant section of GMAT Focus. Old editions are great. Plenty of really smart people out there are writing great quant questions that I think are going to be really good practice for you for quant. That's not a problem. Now, as we get into data insights, this gets dodgier. Should you use non-official questions? Again, I'm saying this in October 2023. GMAT Focus hasn't even been launched yet. We're going off the practice materials that have been released. I think the style of data insights, it's going to be really, really, really tough for test prep people, even the very best, to write good practice questions that mimic the test. So I would be very, very careful with those. Maybe as a community, we'll get our heads around it and create good practice materials as time goes on. I'd be really leery. I think for data insights, the one exception may well be data sufficiency. But again, you can do old official guides with data sufficiency. They're going to be a little bit mathier, but I think that's okay. I think we're going to see good questions. As always, there's a ton of non-official questions for data sufficiency out there that are good. I think if you're using those resources, I think it's going to take a while for them to really match the GMAT Focus. Again, not a lot of super hard math here today, right? And that's what you're going to see on the GMAT Focus for data sufficiency. So you could practice non-official questions. Some of the question banks that Buñuel, our legend here on GMAT Club, has created, for example, you could practice those for data sufficiency. Just be aware that it might take some time for those to really match the style of GMAT Focus. Still good practice, just maybe not the most efficient thing because they might not match perfectly. For the rest of data insights, be really careful with non-official questions, especially in these first couple of years, because I think they're really hard to mimic. And you can go watch the previous 4 videos in the series and go, how hard would it be to write a question that really captures these nuances in the same way? Really, really difficult. So we'll see if test prep folks can do it. But for now, I would say data insights, with the possible exception of data sufficiency, stick to official. All right. Any other general questions? Official books. So good question here. Reading comp critical reasoning changing in the new edition? Nope. Same as always. You can use old editions of the official guides for that. No problem at all. You can also use LSAT. You'll hear me talking about that in tons of videos where I really, really like LSAT as practice. They're harder. You do a bunch of LSAT questions for reading comp critical reasoning. You come back to the GMAT, they're going to feel easier. All right. Use official books. Yes, that's going to be problematic to some degree. Thank you for the question. The issue here is that, so I think you're fine for quant, skip the geometry, but you're fine for the quant section, problem solving specifically. You want to use 2022 and earlier official guides, quant guide for problem solving. You can do that, just skip the geometry. Data sufficiency, it's going to be a little bit different. You could, it's going to be a little bit inefficient because you're going to be practicing a bunch of data sufficiency questions that are pure math, and you're going to see less of that here. So is it a problem? No, you can practice data sufficiency from old official guides. You can. It's just going to be a little bit less efficient because some of the practice you're going to be doing there isn't going to match the new style. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's just a lower return on your time. So I'd recommend sticking to the new ones if you can. If you need to reach back to the old ones, I think that's okay. It's just be aware that you're going to be practicing some things that won't really show up. Reading comp critical reasoning, identical, no changes there. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't planning on a general Q&A here, but why not? Since you're here, let's go nuts. Getting a lot of great questions from the live group. Coordinate geometry is also out. Yes. Yes, but any algebra, well, virtually any algebra question could be solved with coordinate geometry. So what you're going to see is questions that, sure, in theory, you could come at it from a coordinate geometry angle, but no, they are not explicitly out to test coordinate geometry. But really, what is coordinate geometry? It's algebra that's been visualized on a coordinate plane. That's all it is. So there's really not, if you're being kind of a purist or philosophical about math, coordinate geometry and algebra, kind of different ways of presenting the same thing. So the answer to your question is no, they are not testing on coordinate geometry. That said, you might run into questions where I suppose you could use it if you really wanted to, but you will never need it on GMAT Focus. Okay. Some of these I think we need to save for a different video. All right. Question here, Supersonic Foxbat, going to be relevant to very few viewers here. Would you suggest switching to Focus? We've got a video up on the GMAT Ninja channel right now. Which test should you take in this very brief period? We got not even 3 months of overlap between the two tests. So go watch that video. I'll give you my answer to it there. Don't need to bore people with it here because vast majority of you aren't going to be making this decision. as people are watching this in a couple months, hey, you're taking the GMAT Focus, because old GMAT goes away end of January 2024. So got a video for you, Supersonic Foxbat. Love saying that. So check that one out, and you'll have an answer there. Anything else here? Good question, Pratik. And again, apologies as always for mispronunciations. Are the OJ questions enough, or should you buy the other 3 question banks? Other 3 question banks meaning so there's the official guide, then there's a little quant review guide, verbal review guide, data insights review guide. There's also an online question pack. Is it enough for you? Well, I don't know how much practice you need, right? Some people, it's going to be totally fine, just the official guide. As a general rule, the more official questions you practice, the better you're going to be, straight up. So if doing a little bit of practice is enough for you, great. That's awesome. Don't practice more than you need to get the score you need. But I wouldn't recommend trying to save 20, 30, 50, $100 necessarily by avoiding those other official resources. Some of them are better than others. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap. Sometimes that drives me nuts. But if you're really trying to make a huge increase, I think it's worth the investment to get as many official resources as you can. Just as a general rule, if you're making a big increase or you're struggling. But again, for any one person, yeah, maybe you can go practice for a few hours and you're good. Go take the test. And if that's the case, fantastic. Don't feel like you have to. But if your results are kind of stuck someplace you don't want them to be, more official questions, pretty much always better. Okay. I think that is enough for now. I don't see anything else here that I think is really relevant for this video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching live group. Thank you so much for all the participation. Really, really appreciate it. Again, anything you want to see GMAT Focus related content, hit us up in the comments, hit us up in the forum, and we will do our very best to help. Have fun studying, everybody.